Weren't we trying to wrap this up before you got to lizard people?
We're going to do a whole episode on the lizard people.
You're listening to the White Blood Cells Podcast.
You want to start just with like where we're at today with CEOs getting whacked and
that seems to be the trend. I mean, we haven't really talked about this, so I'm curious to hear like what your thoughts are or what you're thinking. To me, there's a lot of interesting stuff that is. I'm just curious. I'm a conspiratorial-minded person, so part of me is trying to think of like, all right, why is this kid who comes from this really well-to-do family going around and killing this CEO of this health company? Is it really because his claims were denied and he had a bad back? And I heard he wasn't even insured by that company.
I don't think he was, and I think that it's weird because I've listened to some background about him, and there apparently he was reading Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, and I heard that on the Jesse Waters show, right? Fox, and the minute that name came up, Jesse Waters kind of like shrinks back, and as do most mainstream media people, right? Because nobody likes this idea. Nobody in mainstream media necessarily likes this idea of kind of this totally non-mainstream person finding their way through the system. Ted Kaczynski killed people for like 10 years, and they could not find this guy.
Yeah, he hid in a cabin, and not a lot of people remember him, and he doesn't come up much. I mean, it's really only. I don't think anyone younger than me is going to know who that even is.
That's what's kind of weird is I think younger guys, these online gamer kind of guys, these guys are really kind of philosophically attuned, and that's what's kind of cool about this groundswell. I think this is a groundswell. This guy, whatever his name is, and I can't. What's his name? This is an Italian guy.
Yeah,
Luigi.
Hey.
Hey.
He whacked a guy.
He's pretty young. He whacked. No, I think it's a big tell. So my analogy this morning at 3 a.m. when I'm thinking this through is this. So the Democrat Party just got outed, right? Their dam broke. Their dam was, and I'm using this dam analogy, right? It's holding stuff back, and the media was part of their dam, a big part of their dam. The legacy media is a big part of their dam. The legal system, the capital market system, all the corporate America system was all part of that dam that was holding this truth back. You know, you can call the water a lot of different things. You can call it, I think it's working class Americans, right? They're behind the dam. The truth is behind there. There's a lot, it's nature is behind there, right? There's a natural gravitational pull that's got to be dammed up. And, you know, obviously the Trump thing was like a big, giant, a blast to open up that dam. And once that dam broke, I mean, everybody now, all the people that had their houses on the other side of that dam are looking for high ground, right? The MSNBC hosts are all now looking for high ground. Oh, we didn't really think that, or, oh, let's go visit Trump and kiss the ring or whatever. Right. You know, they're all looking for their high ground. So,
okay. Because, you know, like you were saying with the whole Marie Antoinette, like the French Revolution, right? It got to a place, and it's crazy when you actually research this or look into the French Revolution of how it got to a head of where the people pretty much overthrew and they beheaded, you know, King George and Marie Antoinette. Like, they took the people who are in charge and they cut off their heads. Like, and so you think about the outrage, and then that gave rise to Napoleon and, you know, French the French started conquering all. But I guess for me, I'm like, are we at there yet? Are we there? This one guy does a thing, kills this
Well,
CEO.
okay,
Yeah.
so let me. It seems trivial, right? It seems trivial. I'm going to read this snippet because I think it's relevant, and we can kind of take off on this. So this is written by this guy, is a French guy, Frederick Bastiat. He's an economist and statesman in 1850. He says, "Man can live and satisfy his wants only by ceaseless labor, by the ceaseless application of his faculties to natural resources. This process is the origin of property. But it is also true that man may live and satisfy his wants by seizing and consuming the products of the labor of others. This process is the origin of plunder. Since man is naturally inclined to avoid pain, and since labor is pain in itself, it follows that men will resort to plunder whenever plunder is easier than work. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living in society, they create for themselves in the course of time a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it." I don't know what was going on in 1850. I mean, it had to be a significantly smaller scale system of plunder than we have now. Right. Because what people don't understand in our system, because we who are alive today, even an 85-year-old person who's alive today, doesn't really know a system where they weren't involved in kind of this monetary system that we have now. And so the point of that is that's plunder. If you have an illegal money system, and I don't want to go too far into that because it's complicated, right? That our money system, the Federal Reserve notes that we use to exchange, it's fiat currency, and that is theft. That's in and of itself, it's a form of theft. And you have to really get your arms around that to understand. And that has been happening in this country since 1933. So, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's almost nobody alive who even understands what it was like before that. So we're all accustomed to this legal system that authorizes it and moral code that glorifies it. We don't know any different. And so it's hard to explain this to people who don't really study this a ton and kind of obsess about it like some of us weirdos, right?
They wake up at 3.
They wake up at 3. Yeah. But at a certain point too, this dam that this capital market system, like all these capitalists, and I would probably consider myself, like, I don't like to define myself in those terms hardly ever. The one thing I would say, if I'm anything, is I'm a free markets guy, right? If you study Milton Friedman at all, and Milton Friedman's a free markets guy, and he does, and that's a different thing than a capitalist, I think. Capitalistic system, that's a broad term, and people tend to describe themselves with that term, which I think is kind of odd because the capital market system in this country, everybody that I know that is associated with that system tends to believe that we have the best thing going in all of planet Earth.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when someone says like America's the greatest country on the planet, it's because it seems that you can come to America with $20 in your pocket and make something of yourself.
You probably could do that, and how that comes about doesn't really get questioned all that much. Here's an example that I'll give you that's maybe going to shine a little light on this. So Uber, for example. So that company operates still at a loss, I think. I'm not certain if it still does. Amazon did. Yeah. Amazon's kind of a unique situation. Uber's really representative of what I want to try to discuss with this thing, because it operated for its entire existence, for the most part, in a loss. But the only reason it was allowed to do that is because our capital market system, a bunch of guys with a bunch of money that they wanted to invest, venture capitalists, decided to take this company and their technology. We can debate whether their technology is probably pretty good, but they could operate at a loss for like 10 years while running all their competition out of business, right? Now, if all of us could do that, then we'd all be That's not how free markets, that's not a free market, right? That's a manipulated market. And that's part of what I'm saying about most of the capital market system is it's a way to manipulate one set of guys who've got insider kind of access to this money to allow them to, maybe in this case, operate at a loss for a long time. In other cases, I mean, you just, like, the regular free market system would not allow you to operate with that kind of
Well, it
impunity
goes back
for
to the
that long.
same thing back in 2008, right? It's like when all these banks got bailed out and everybody got, slapped on the wrist, but there was really no consequences, and no one was able to fail. It's like that just perpetuates the problem that,
It totally perpetuates the problem. You're right, because no one got indicted during that whole global financial crisis. There wasn't any indictment of any CEO level person. They all got private islands. Right. Angelo Mozilla was the CEO of Countrywide. He's dead now, I think, but he got his private island. Like, he bailed out Golden Parachute, like a lot of these guys did. Nobody saw any consequence. So you're right, that this system that we have, it privatizes profits, and it nationalizes losses, right? And so when I say nationalizes them, that means it spreads around. Right. The losses get spread around to all of us assholes at the bottom who decide, well, we didn't decide anything. That's the other part of my whole thing that's at the roots of this is understanding consent, like the ability to consent. Like, taxation is supposedly a way that taxpayers consent. Like, we voted for whomever to get in office, and then he passed this tax plan. So at least you quasi consented to that. With the Federal Reserve Bank, and they just make up money, they print money, or they call it quantitative easing. They don't say we're printing money. They call it quantitative easing. And anybody who knows anything about Federal Reserve Banking knows this terminology. But for all the rest of the lay people, they don't understand. They just think it's some magic thing. Quantitative easing, it doesn't sound like we're printing money, but they're just printing money and handing it out to whomever they like. And so they handed it out in the global financial crisis. They handed out to bankers, and they bailed those bankers out.
COVID, they just printed more money and handed it out to the people, so that we wouldn't riot and freak out and tear down this place because they were locking us in our houses. And
they did. They handed it out in a kind of a strange way during that period. Like, the mortgage business, we went nuts. It was the best year we ever had, the best couple of years we ever had. So we handed it out to all of our clients via lower mortgage, which is kind of good. I mean, that's one way of handing it out. Like you said, it's helping the small guy. A little bit of the small guy, still homeowners, but the really small guy got nothing out of that. The other small business guys got a ton of money because those PPP loans. Right. And
if I got the PPP loan.
If you had,
I had a couple employees. It wasn't much though. It didn't really take me that far.
It didn't?
Covered like a month and a half of like payroll and expenses.
Well, that's better than a poke in the eye with the sharp stick, but it wasn't a loan, right?
Right. Yeah, I didn't have to pay
You'll never pay it back. Did you get the ERC? It's the Employee Retention Credit. That was like a year later, which nobody knows about. Yeah. But those were bigger, and that was another. It wasn't a loan. It was a giveaway to small business, which is kind of good because at least they did it to small business. But some of these businesses weren't so small.
Right. Some you hear like the I want to say I was at a chamber thing recently, and they were saying like, a small business is like 500 or less employees. And I'm thinking like 500 people?
Yeah.
I have 4 employees.
Yeah, no. So for you, that's what I'm saying is like, that was a pretty broad stroke where they just blasted it out. And I know some guys that got rich off of, yeah. So, and that was, I think, on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars that the government just gave away. Now, when they give it away, who's paying for all that?
I mean, we are.
The whole world is paying for all of that. So I was debating my buddy this morning, Jason, if you're out there watching, this is for you. When you, so he's like, well, they didn't steal money from me. I'm like, no, they did, but like, it's a small chunk. Like if you got a penny from everybody in this country, you'd be rich, right? If you got 1/10 of a penny or 1,000th of a penny from every person on planet Earth, you'd be rich, right? That's what they're doing, and it looks really benign if you put it in those terms. Oh, I got ripped off for a
Half
thousandth of a penny.
It's like, yeah, who cares?
But that's what they're doing. These guys, so that's how this made up money system works. It's plunder, right? And so, it's like the guy who eats a steak. I made this analogy. I don't know if this is a good one or not. Like
I'll
the
tell
guy that
you.
eats you tell me, please, and the rest of you guys tell me too. The guy who eats a steak but doesn't realize that, it took somebody to kill that cow, to gut that cow, to do all those things. Just because we're removed by like 7 layers from this thing that happens. Oh, so then we're not part of it. Oh, it's magically not our fault. Well, it is. If you're eating the steak, well,
Yeah. It's getting killed for you.
It's getting killed for you, and I'm not saying like I'm a meat eater, so I don't. I'm just like, well, it's like the hypocrisy of somebody who's a vegetarian saying, or it's kind of the removal from the actual act of these things, right? The theft. I didn't go take that penny from that guy, so I didn't do anything bad. But we're all complicit. I've stolen things. We're all complicit. If we live in America, we're all complicit to some extent. But to make it a lifestyle and a habit, I think is a whole different thing. And that's kind of where this thing with this CEO getting murdered becomes a really telling thing, I think, because the groundswell of response on social media is pretty.
Yeah, it's been nuts.
You can't really deny this.
Well, and I think it revealed the disdain that society has for healthcare and the healthcare system and how it's broken.
Yeah. There's no question. Everybody in this country knows that healthcare is broken. Yeah. We have the worst outcomes in terms of health as a nation, right? Yeah. But we have also the most expensive system. So those two things don't add up.
Well,
right?
and we're the richest country.
And
we have the poorest health of its citizens.
Right. But how is our richness or our wealth defined?
Well, it's because the dollar is used to buy oil. And so everyone has to buy our dollar in order to buy oil. And so that makes us wealthy.
Yeah. And so my point in bringing that up is the dollar is almost as artificial as another buddy of mine says it's like as arbitrary as using pine needles, right? Yeah. Like there's seashells, whatever kind of like valueless thing on planet Earth. That's what our dollars are. So to measure ourselves in those terms is pretty meaningless is kind of the point.
So don't you think something's going to have to change though? Like it seems that we're on the cusp, the precipice of something drastic happening. I don't know when, and I try not to be the dooms, and I wish Adam was here because, he was calling when the Greek, was defaulting on their loan when Greece was back in, I don't know when that was.
That was like 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah.
I don't remember when it was, but, he was just like, oh man, and he was just all about it and just being like, you better prepare because it's going to cause the domino effect of things coming to bear,
And I think he's on to something, and a lot of people are, because people who kind of understand this thing know that you can kind of hold this water back for a while, but eventually that water's coming through. Gravity's just going to pull that through at some point. I mean, your dam might be really damn good. And the good thing about this dam, there's another dam that's going to break, is what my point about this is. This CEO thing is just a tiny representation of cracks showing up in this dam. And the thing that helps you understand the pressure behind it is all this social media response. Right. These people who sit in their basements and like are gaming, they're not just gaming. They're paying attention to stuff that's pretty interesting. And my stepson is a perfect example of that because he reads a ton. And I think these young guys, they're not just, some of them are just playing games, of course, but a lot of these guys are pretty sharp kids, and they're reading a lot of historical stuff. And I think intuitively too, they just know that there's something way off. There's something way off about why they're sitting in a basement. They don't have a job. They're being convinced to think and believe in things that don't make any sense. And I don't know. I
I
think
mean, I
it's
had so many friends. I mean, especially in '08, I had so many friends who were coming out of college and they couldn't get a job. It's like the system said, go to college, get a degree, and then you'll have security and a good life. And then I had a handful of friends that like couldn't find jobs, were like working as baristas at Starbucks or whatever because the system wasn't rewarding them for going to college anymore.
Right.
And that enraged and I think woke up a lot of people. And I think even with going to school or the misnomer of going to college is kind of permeating, at least for me, especially I have kids that are thinking about college now. And I'm really trying to discuss with them and talk to them about like, what would be the purpose of you going to college other than you want to be a neurosurgeon and you really need to like learn how to do this specific thing. But could you learn a trade or could you apprentice somewhere, and learn a skill, and then now you have something that's valuable that you can give back to society,
Right. Well, that's the funny thing is that I've kind of done a little bit of research about how Germany educates their population of people, and this is we kind of talked about this a couple episodes ago too, with the Danish country who kind of takes care of their population a lot differently than United States does. In Germany, they have kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like they favor blue collar work. They don't look down on blue collar work the way we do in this culture. And like so they train. They know that there's a certain percentage of the population. There's not everybody can be an academic. Right. In this country, like if you're not an academic, well, you're just a loser. Yeah. And this is why I love that Mike Rowe. Do you know that guy Mike Rowe who does the Dirty Jobs show?
Oh yeah.
I mean that's such a cool show, and it's such a cool venture that he's undertaken. With recognizing that there's tons of guys that are totally like they love that kind of work, and there's no like as much as they talk about AI is going to replace labor, there's no way it's going to completely replace all forms of manual labor, and that goes back to this whole idea that, and this goes back to us kind of talking biblically too, like men kind of need to push that rock up the hill in order to have some sort of fulfillment in their life. Yeah. It's just requisite. Your mind can't exist in a state of total opulence. I think that's why so many rich people just wind up being drug addicts. Look at Joe Biden's son. What's his name? Right? But there's countless examples of that. These people that are just born into a lifestyle of opulence and they wind up becoming nobodies. Not all of them, of course, but I think men in general need to have something to like physically work on at younger years, so that's the thing. Like these guys coming out of college in 2008, I think that certain countries like Switzerland, I think you used to have to go, and this may still be true, you had to go into the military. Once you became an adult, 18, you go into the military. You learn how to self-subsist. You learn how to defend your country, these sorts of things, because they know at that age, you're healthy. You should be trained to learn how to do these self-subsistence things, and it's just a valuable thing to have a population of people that know how to do those things and know how to appreciate hard work. We don't do that here.
Do you think we've gotten too big as a country? I mean, at some point you have to, like, how can you control that many people unless you're on a communist dictatorship?
You don't control them. And you don't control them. It's like centralized economies never work. And this is another debate that people will have all the time. And I think that's Milton Friedman would sit here and wholeheartedly agree with us. That's why free markets are the most efficient system ever known to man. But underneath free markets is the presumption that there are people that have a sense of morality, a sense of basis for their being, and a sense of wisdom that gets passed down and down and down. And that's what we have been short-circuited in this country. I think there has been a disconnection between, I think we talked about this a few times ago, that the greatest generation, and we can beg to differ about that or not, but like that greatest generation who lived through the Great Depression, right? Those people had to work. I mean, there weren't too many. There was probably a very tiny percentage of the population of this country who didn't work, but it was tiny, right? The rest of this population of this country had to do work because there were no robots, there were no cell phones, there weren't even phones, I don't think. So everybody was involved in farming, in industry to some extent, working in factories, building, construction. We had a huge apparel industry in this country. I didn't even really pay close attention to that. Textiles was a huge, like, we produced tons of stuff in this country, real stuff that now has all been farmed off to China. So we really had our hands on a ton of stuff, like most of the population of this world did. And then somewhere along the line, we learned this thing. We learned that we can plunder a lot more easily, and this was sometime after World War II. And so that's why I'm saying we've become very accustomed to, I mean, what's the Mad Men show? Did you watch that show?
The guys in the 60s run the print marketing like shop or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, marketing is basically salesmanship, which is basically like, like, let's see
how do I
we
manipulate
can get
somebody
these
in order to make a decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it is. We've become really good marketers, and we've become really good at financialization. And that's a term that's like not too familiar with people.
So really, we've just become a shell of a society.
Yeah, there's no question.
Like we've just become plundering. We're the lowest common denominator of like, how can we make the easy money? Like, let's just farm out clothing and farming and all these other kind of things. And let's just have this. I mean, isn't that really what happened in the 20s with the Great Depression? Like, opulence and everything was at its height in the 20s. Yeah. And then all that came to
It did, but it was much different in the 20s because we were still producing stuff. So that was when they just first started. That's when the Federal Reserve Bank just came out. So they were just kind of testing this whole system, and it was in its infancy, but we still had a tremendous, it was the Industrial Revolution, right? So we had industry here. Our steel industry was massive, right? The apparel industry, I don't know. I'm probably I didn't think of all the industries that we were involved in, but we produced a ton of stuff.
Well, we were
in this
still
country.
Self-sufficient. I mean,
Totally
even when World War I, came around, it's like we didn't want to get involved. And even with World War II, right? It was like, listen, we don't need the world. Like, we have ourselves. Right. And then it wasn't until Pearl Harbor, getting bombed and then just kind of drug us into the war. But
yeah. Well, and like we're probably either one of us aren't prepared enough to talk about the whole history of the 1900s, which is a really pivotal, interesting history.
We need to have an expert come on.
We need to have an expert come on for sure.
Yes.
But my point is that this dam that has been created is holding back a lot of truth behind that dam, and the truth behind that dam is the working class, I think, of this country. They've more or less been completely nullified in terms of a political voice. Now, people talk about, voting and blah, blah, blah. The biggest percentage of people who don't vote are, I only learned this by listening to this most recent, it's working class men. Working class men don't the
people who need to be voting because it affects them
the most, yeah. Right? But they turned out big time for Trump, but still the percentage of them that vote is almost nothing because they know intuitively that voting probably doesn't mean all that much. Not much is going to change, even with Trump winning. And look, I'm a Trump fan, but listen, this isn't going to change anything sociologically as much as we need it to change. The only thing sociologically that I think is going to change things is people becoming a lot more philosophically aware of how things really work at their base level in life, so that when you're being taken advantage of, when you're getting ripped off, and when somebody else is ripping somebody else off, that somebody's got to go check that down. It's not always up to the police to go do it. It's not always up to, sometimes, look, murder is I think everybody agrees that murder is wrong, right?
Unless you're killing your healthcare CEO.
Unless you're killing your healthcare CEO. Unless you're
then it's debatable.
Unless you're capitally punishing, Ted Bundy or whatever, there's certain cases where we exclude it. But when that when that dam gets built up and it disconnects the water behind the dam from the water, being those people, like the hardworking people that are truth-based, they're hardworking, from the people on the other side of that dam who are people that are ripping them off and taking advantage, and they're being insulated from those consequences. Look, my rules for fools speech. There's like hundreds of thousands of laws in this country, right?
Yeah. And you got a buddy that wants to make more laws.
I know.
When is he
came
getting
up
him
with
on the
more.
show?
Well, I tried to get him on
Yeah,
today.
you need to get him and say, hey, why don't you tell us some rules, some laws?
He has some really good ones. So Seth, you got to come out here and talk about your rules, because they're good ones. I'm not holding back from that. They're really genuinely good rules. But the fact of the matter is there's millions of them. There's millions of laws that most of which don't impact anybody. They don't get enforced. But my point was and is that nearly all of those rules, who passes all of those rules?
Well, I mean, a lot of rules are passed by bureaucrats that aren't voted in, but they're just people with a little power that say.
They're people with a little power, but they're pretty much the people that are insisting that those rules get passed are people that are greasing those bureaucrats. They're people with money are the ones that are getting laws passed. Poor people don't get laws passed ever. Ever. Sometimes they'll sprinkle some fairy dust on poor people just to, like you said, keep them happy and content a little bit, which is part of what you're saying in COVID happened. They sprinkled a little fairy dust on us to shut us up. But more importantly, they legalized pot. They opened the liquor stores immediately. And that was their version of sprinkling some fairy dust. They may as well have been kicking sand in our face, because they didn't go out and insist that we become really healthy and start hardworking.
They taped off my kids' playgrounds.
Right.
But they opened up the pot shops.
They took down the basketball hoops. Like in Denver, I was trying to go shoot some the basketball hoops were taken off. I've never in my life ever seen that. They took down tennis court nets.
Listen, go get drunk and get high. Do not come out here and try to be healthy and play sports in the sun.
Nobody with any sense in their head thinks that was, that was a truthful situation. That was.
But really, I mean, this just sounds like the premise. I mean, Ted, you would be a really great Bond villain. You know? It's like the Bond villain always wants to tear down the current system so that it can re-rise from the ashes.
Well, I'm not
hit
tearing
the reboot.
Down. I'm not tearing down anything.
I'm not saying you're tearing anything down, but I'm saying, I mean, all I hear you saying is like, okay, here the system has turned into this plundering, pilfering system where everyone's out to get their own, and they're going to step on the little guy below them in order to have any type of success, because that's how our system works.
Yeah. But that's not.
But there's like, how do we break this down? How do we flip the squid? Flip the switch.
Flip the squid.
How do we flip the squid?
Well, the script will flip on its own, because all I'm doing is like noticing that there is this thing called truth out there. All I'm doing is noticing that. And there's a lot of other guys out there, all you guys watching probably notice that too, or you wouldn't even be tuning in, because the people who don't recognize truth can't hear this messaging. They can't hear it. There's that cognitive dissonance issue, and they can't hear this talk. And those are the people, you've heard of the useful idiots thing, right? These useful idiots are genuinely part of that dam that are holding all of us back. Now, the more healthy we get, the more prepared we're going to be when this dam breaks. We are not going to have to go out and cause this dam to break. It's going to break on its own. It's going to break on its own. We don't have to go out and kill CEOs. But this whole vitriol against CEOs is representative of the fact that there's a lot of people out there that recognize this truth that I'm talking about, and that all of you guys watching are probably thinking about. And so that's part of what I'm saying, is we got to get connected so that when the dam breaks and all hell is breaking loose, because there's going to be a lot of water behind that dam, and there's going to be a lot of turmoil and crazy upheaval. But the more kind of balanced we are in our minds, like about how things really work, like philosophically, ethically, morally, like how do all these things work? And how do we reform ourselves in a way that we don't get faced with this issue again? And because we're not all getting wiped out, right? The Bitcoin thing is another thing that I used to discount a lot, and we talked about that a little bit ago. I think that is part of how this reformation will happen, because this currency thing that we have is at the roots of how it's so fouled up. Because this whole capital market system, this whole plunder system is based on that capital market system being so fouled up, and it's legal, but it's not righteous.
Right.
And nobody's really taking issue with that. So if we want to start reforming it, there has to be people who understand, well, that's not righteous. The constitutional, the people who drafted the Constitution specifically wrote some stuff about money in it. None of what we have now has anything to do with what they were talking about. Bitcoin kind of has some solution to that, I believe. And I'm not enough of a technology guru to understand if that is a true perfect.
Well, I mean, part of me feels like it still can be manipulated, you know?
I
mean,
think you're
it's
right.
digital, so there's still an element, and there's so many smart guys that talk about it, and I've been following it for, I don't know, maybe like 7 years or so, you know, and I bought my first amounts of Bitcoin, you know, a few $100 back then, and you know, and it was still like, you know, $12,000-$13,000, you know, a coin back then. But, and I still don't even understand the, you know, they talk about it as an asset and a store of value, you know,
Right.
and how you don't really spend your Bitcoin, you borrow against it or whatever, just like you would any asset.
Right.
But the thing that breaks my brain about it is that, you know, right now at least, it's not like a good or service, right? Or like, if I have chickens, okay, and you want eggs, and my chickens lay eggs, and you have cows, and you butcher your cows, or you make milk or cheese from them, you and I can barter, and we can trade my eggs for your milk, right? With Bitcoin, there's an element of, like, in the real world, like, I know it does a particular process, right? Like it processes transactions at really quickly and low fees. But at the end of the day, like, if there was some sort of EMP attack or China takes down our power grid, like, am I going to be like, hey, I have all this Bitcoin, like, does it really matter?
That's the bummer about it. The best thing that I've understood, and then I've got another buddy who's a computer network guru, right? And so the value in Bitcoin is that network is impervious to, because of its redundancy. Yeah. That's the whole thing about the internet too. In the old days, you know, they had a supercomputer. Like in the 70s, they had like one computer trying to, right? And then they realized, well, this is fallible. If this thing breaks, well, then the redundancy thing of the internet, that's the strength of the internet. That's the strength of Bitcoin. And we're speaking in really bozo guy terms here, because us two don't know half as much as all you guys know.
If anything, it'd be good for the comment section, you know, because they can just talk about what idiots we are.
Yeah, you guys let us know what idiots we are. But essentially, like, I don't think there's certain countries, I think in African countries, maybe Venezuela, where Bitcoin is used as a currency. I think because of the technology interface with being able to. In this country, we're not used to it at all. I don't think anybody uses it as a means of exchange. We convert into U.S. dollars, and then we go buy stuff with that. So at some point, the convertibility into something transactional will probably improve. But underlying it, most people's problem is it's not backed by anything. Well, dollars aren't backed by anything either. I don't know if that's a news flash to anybody out there, but most people it's not. Dollars aren't backed by anything either.
Aren't dollars really backed by the power of the United States?
No, there is no power of the United States. The United States is broke.
I know
okay?
we're broke, but the fear, it's the idea of the
it's
power.
It's the idea of the power. The idea, and you're right. And so that idea is what creates value of everything. Even gold is only valuable because people believe that somebody else is going to think it's valuable. So everything operates that way. They say that whole phrase that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. The beholder is the guy who's willing to maybe take it from you, right? And so if everybody believes that US dollars are valuable, then they're valuable. Yeah. If everybody believes Bitcoin is valuable, the difference with Bitcoin now is only, like, I don't know how many people are actually engaged or operating in Bitcoin, but it's a ridiculously small percentage of the population. Everybody says that number is going to increase massively, which is going to drive the price up because there's only a limited supply. So that is one reason to kind of believe in Bitcoin, combined with the fact that if you believe the internet can't be broken down by an EMP, and I don't know if that's true. I don't study EMPs enough to know. That's gonna
well,
happen.
I think EMPs are very targeted, right? In the sense of if you did it over New York or LA or Chicago, they would shut those cities down. Or if you did one high enough in the atmosphere, like dropped a nuke,
right,
and it could shut off all electricity.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We need an EMP expert.
Way
to come
above
up
our
here.
pay grade on this thing too. We need like a panel of experts. You guys come on our show, get this going, so we know what we're talking about. But I think.
So then, what is the truth? Like, explain to me.
Well, the truth. The truth is
the opposite of this.
The opposite of this. Well, so this basic thing that man can live and satisfy his wants only by ceaseless labor. That's the truth. Yeah. Everybody knows that. I said this to my kids for the longest time. The only thing that solves every problem, there's only one thing, and it's your willingness to do hard work. If you are willing to do hard work, well, you'll be fine. You'll always be fine if you're willing to do it, because you can always trade your labor for something that you need.
But then you have the spectrum, right? You have someone who doesn't want to work but wants to plunder the system and take advantage of it because they're like, I don't want to work. And then you have the people who just want to get drunk, high on a corner with a street sign and be like, I don't want to work.
And you're always going to have some of those people, but you cannot build a society that the majority of the people in it want to be the guy who just wants to sit on a corner and hope that other people are going to help him out. That's where we're at in this country. We've got people either in a wagon or people pulling a wagon. The guys pulling the wagon are the guys willing to do work. The guys in the wagon are guys that don't want to do work. You can't have more people in the wagon than you have pulling it, because the wagon ain't going anywhere. And eventually it's going to go backwards down the hill. And that's the state at which we're at now. I think we've gotten to the point where government entitlements are ridiculous. I mean, the whole baby boomer population has stopped working. After COVID, they almost all retired, right? Yeah. So they are in the wagon. They're pulling us backward down the hill. The people in the wagon are people that have to be in the labor force to pay for these bozos to, keep playing golf or drinking wine or whatever, taking vacations on Viking cruise lines. You can only do so much of that. And that's kind of the truth that I'm talking about. I don't know. I mean, it's just a basic, like, our country is just like a family. The family's got to balance a budget. If you have the family spending way more money than they make, you can survive for a while because credit cards are out there, and we're the biggest credit card holder in the world.
Yeah, I saw a whole thing where they were interviewing the guys from MasterCard or Visa or somebody like that, and they were saying how their fees, and it's like trillions of dollars, and how it's actually extremely predatory. How, granted, I don't know the debate on this in the sense of, in some ways, if you're an idiot who takes a credit card and then spends more than you have, or you spend all that you're allotted on credit, and then you go into bankruptcy, or you complain that you were lent money that you didn't have and now you can't pay it back. But in the same way, then you have these credit card companies, right, that are making it almost impossible for you to pay it back because interest rates are 38% or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so,
let me let you all in on a little secret. They don't care if you ever pay it back because they made up the money to begin with. They didn't have that money, and they had nothing to give to you. It only becomes validated when you give it back to them, right? That's when it becomes validated. And that's the flaw with our financial system. They care if you don't pay it back, but they don't care that much, right? Because they know a certain percentage of people just aren't going to pay it back. That's not the credit card that I was really referring to anyway. But I appreciate the point because it's kind of representative of the fact. My point is that United States of America borrows from the rest of the world. We're the biggest debtor nation on planet Earth, and that can only last for so long. We got away with it for a long time because we had a huge military. But there's a couple of other people on this planet that are building a pretty big military to say, look, we're tired of this bullshit. We're tired of being robbed by you guys, and we're not going to allow for it for too much longer. My point is we probably ought to get right on that before we become the guy who's getting wiped out and taken over. That's just like, I think that's an inevitability. Now, Trump will probably work to solve that problem. That's why he wants to pass this thing where he's investing our reserve currency in Bitcoin, because that, I think, is way more.
Well, it hedges,
It hedges all this debt that we have. And you got to start somewhere. I mean, it's going to take us a while to get out of this massive amount of debt because the Federal Reserve Bank has way more on its debt books than like they're willing to even talk about. But that's a whole different Oprah. That's a giant web of weirdness. That the bottom line is, I mean, these CEOs are kind of they're the most complicit people in this system, right? They're taking $1 million comp packages to sit behind this dam and cause the rest of us to believe that this is a justified system that we're doing. Their pay increases have gone up, and you can pull up any chart you want to and look at the CEO compensation as compared to regular guy compensation. Theirs has gone up like 1,000-fold as compared to the average working class person.
Yeah, but wouldn't you say that it's the CEO or the person who's ahead of a company that really drives the vision and causes its success? I mean, because you look at Steve Jobs, right? It's like he took Apple, which his second time around, Apple turned into a failing company with all the people and all the doers and all the workers making Apple computers and PDAs and all these other kind of things. Yet they couldn't succeed. And then one guy comes in with an idea and a drive and a passion, and he turns a company around and makes it the most wealthiest in the world.
I know you're an Apple guy, so I'm going to have to tread lightly on this territory here as we speak. But what did Apple really do?
From what? Going from failure to...
Not going from failure to whatever success. What do they create?
They create a computer.
They created a computer, but more importantly, they created a phone, right? What does that phone do?
I mean, emails, text messages, internet.
That's what generally speaking, what does it do? We've talked about this a lot too. Those things we all can agree are they're the second most toxic thing that ever got created by humans. The first, I think, is an automobile, because that's a whole different Oprah too.
The automobile is more toxic.
Well, just in the way we use it now, right? And it goes back to my insulating people. When are you most pissed off in a car? When are you most anxious in a car? When are you
Maybe you are. I don't feel anxious or pissed off in a car.
But phones, there's no question, because if you've seen that movie, The Social Dilemma, they just tell you that all we're doing with these things is we're monopolizing your brain, and we're just going to try our best to keep your eyeballs on this thing as long as we can. So all Apple did is they destroyed a population of kids. My kids are destroyed because of that phone. I never bought them an Apple iPhone, but their grandparents did. Every Christmas they got the upgrade. And so it became this thing, and you weren't cool if you didn't get you're still not cool if you don't get the latest iPhone. And if you've ever watched Bill Burr, have you seen the Bill Burr bit about, oh my God, dude, everybody's got to look up, insert Bill Burr bit about the Steve Jobs guy. This guy
Actually, Nerd Jesus died in the last year, right? Steve Jobs. Yeah, he died, right? I know, a lot of nerds here tonight. I know, you're sad. I didn't get it. I didn't get the big deal they made about that guy. when he died. They were like, he changed the world. That was insane. He changed the world. The world was one way, and then Steve Jobs came, and it was another. What did he do? Somebody, for the love of God, what the fuck did that guy do? What did he do? He told other people what to invent? I want my entire music collection in that phone. Get on it! Right? And then these poor, nameless, faceless scientists got to go in a back room and figure it out. How the fuck are we going to get all of this into this? I mean, what year does this guy think this is? This is crazy. This is like Buck Rogers. Dude, my kid has a birthday in like 11 months. Steve Jobs just walking by. I don't hear any thinking going on in there. Just strutting around the office, eating some pretentious fruit like a pear, right? Just throwing out ideas. Well, there's another one. There's another one I just came up with on the way to work. I was reading a magazine the other day, turning pages, you know? I like to turn pages on a screen that aren't even there. Yeah, wrap your fucking heads around that, guys. See you in 8 years. Where you going, Michael? Big, little, get on it. Right? And all these people slave away to make his vision come true. And then they have the big nerd fest, right? Down there, Comic-Con, and all their nerd mecca. They're all showing up with their Acne and their Hulk shirts, limping into the arena, right? Does Steve Jobs go out with a whole chorus line of scientists? No, he goes out there by himself. Sneakers and no belt, like it was no biggie, right? like he's Tesla, tapping into the atmosphere. I know, this is always uncomfortable. I know, you bought into it, right? That whole advertising, the way they aligned themselves with some of the greatest people of all time. Jesus, Gandhi, me. Remember that? Muhammad Ali, John Lennon, this guy. How the fuck was that dude like any of them? Gandhi didn't have a sweatshop. Nah, he didn't have people leaping to their deaths only to catch a net and get ricocheted back through the window to have to put together yet another iPad. John Lennon didn't have children in his basement pressing those fucking albums.
You know, I mean, all they did was rip off China's labor to make these phones and come over here and freaking destroy our culture.
Do you know how much an iPhone costs to make?
$10?
$10.
Yeah, and they sell them for what, 1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Isn't that crazy?
I mean, so your success.
All right, okay.
Right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to blow any holes through. There are plenty of good CEOs. I'm not saying every CEO on planet Earth is a dirtbag, but the ones perpetuating these kinds of, I mean, that's just one case study. Almost anybody that you ask in this country would reference Apple as an American success story, right? But we just pretty clearly, and this took us like 60 seconds to blow the doors off that argument.
But I guess one of the thoughts I have around this is, what would you say? I mean, I want to hear what you have to say about this, right? Because so the iPhone, right? We plundered China population in order to make this phone.
We plunder their labor.
We plunder their labor to make these phones because they'll make them for pennies, right? But then my thought is that, but the poverty that those people were living in, we lifted them up, paying them pennies in order to make iPhones. Or even Henry Ford making cars. Yeah. Like, at what point would you say it's like, isn't that part of America's ingenuity and
yes.
drive? And
yes.
It's like, there is no utopia where we will just all farm and get along and trade stuff. And it's like, isn't that what makes America great? Is some of the ingenuity and the endless possibility of success?
That's what makes a free market economy great. You're totally right. And I'm not saying there is an answer. There is no answer to, there's just like, that's the cool thing about free markets is like it distributes all these decision-making capabilities to hundreds of millions of people or maybe less, whatever the number is, but it distributes it all out to all these people so they can all, if they're all consenting adult people with kind of good decision-making capabilities, and that's tough to accomplish, right? Because all of us probably know this too. 80% of any population on planet Earth are basically drooling retards that can't make many decisions about anything. Now, we want to grow that. We don't really want that to be true, but like history has pretty much given us plenty of evidence on that fact. And that's not to say that like we can't improve on that. I think that's one good thing about some technologies. It allows us to distribute ideas if they're good. It allows us to distribute them to a lot more people. So that is probably the one upside of technology that I can appreciate. YouTube has been a great way, a great mechanism to
learn,
dispose of,
educate.
yeah, way better
share,
than our school system is, I think. So there is some upside. I'm not saying that this is all bad, and you're right. Like, I don't have an answer to that, but what I do believe is that the manipulative system that we're involved in is way, way, way out of control, and very few people are really taking issue with it.
Yeah, and more people need to be taking issue with it.
Yeah,
and that's when real change can happen, is if enough people are fed up with it.
Yeah.
And, off with their heads.
And it's weird to say that because, like, everybody's like, well, I'm just going to go vote, or I'm going to go to my city council meeting, or I'm going to go to have you ever been to an HOA meeting?
No, but I hear they're terrible.
I've been to a couple. When I first got in my first house in an HOA, I went to a couple. It's the most brutal experience you can possibly imagine because there's a bunch of old ladies talking about the color of the fence and what they want to, and that's what a city council meeting is too. It's lowest common denominator. That's what government is. And that's why most libertarians are always considered to be people who want no government. And I'm going to defend some libertarians right now because I think any sensible person realizes that there is a place for government. There's certain things that private enterprise can't really replace. A police force is one of those things. A military may be one of those things, but the Constitution did not allow for a standing military. It did not allow for, nobody really pays attention to that either. So us having a standing military is a defiance of the guys who formulated that philosophy in the beginning of this country thought about stuff a lot. Yeah. There were a lot of philosophers that existed back then.
Well, and they've seen the failures or how things have gone wrong. And this was the new world, right?
Yeah.
It was like, let's look at how England and all these other things have failed or how they've repressed the people, and let's go make a new world.
Yeah. And so they got to start from scratch. How many other times in human history has that happened where they got to start almost from scratch? And so in their defense, they had a pretty clean slate. We do not have that clean slate.
We can't go somewhere. And they'll just nuke us.
Back
then, you had to get, stuff a musket and try to it'd be impossible to defend your country.
It would be impossible. But going back to that CEO thing, I mean, the healthcare industry is pretty rotten. I think most people can probably see that and agree with that. But I think that it goes way beyond that too. I mean, most of our corporate structure in this country is rotten. They're only doing things for the sake of making more money. Like United Healthcare isn't doing things for the sake of actually saving people's lives or even improving people's lives. They don't even they may have that on a mission statement, but it's only for their PR. It's not actually in their bones. Like almost every company that exists in this country is pretty much about making money. They're just about making money. That's the only goal that they have. And that's philosophically why we're so jacked up. That Danish company that I mentioned to you, that Novo Nordisk a couple of episodes ago, that is obviously not their motivation. You can see it in that interview. You can see that lady is genuine. That 60 Minutes interview, it's from a couple months ago on 60 Minutes. It's a good story to watch because you can see it in her whole way of articulating the idea that how they developed that drug and what their company's about. And the CEO was on there too. And I think this is what's kind of weird. German countries have not all of them, but they have a more protective philosophy of their population of people. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it's so much different here. Do you ever contemplate that?
I think it just comes back to that. I think it's so different here is because everyone has the opportunity to plunder.
That
You know?
Well, it's that and the fact that we have so many different cultures, right? So
Yeah,
we
we're a
don't
melting pot
we're a
of-
melting pot of
Yeah.
different cultures. So we can't really ever get on the same page about, that's the difference. I think the Greatest Generation, it was kind of a pretty uniform culture, and so
we're Americans.
it was just Americans. Now we're a true, genuine melting pot of all kinds of cultures and all different belief systems, and it's really hard to get anybody on the same page about that. And on top of that, we have this corporate structure that's like, well, let's just take advantage of this as much as we can because these people are all distracted. They can't get on the same page about anything. So why don't we just take advantage of this? We can plunder the shit out of these people. They're easy targets.
Right. Well, and I hope that there starts to arise a new system because I think new systems can be risen within our current system, right? Like we can't go start a new country somewhere, but if you're a doctor, you could start a private practice and you could start providing affordable care and making alternative to these big organizations or whatever.
Just
and
cash pay systems.
And if enough people started doing cash pay systems that decrease the profits of the big guys or make them go out of business or make them reform how they do things, then that's how we can actually see change.
Have you heard of functional medicine doctors?
Yeah.
That group of people has pretty much embraced this idea. They're not in the whole AMA, the American Medical Association thing, because that's a manipulative force. They're in the cash payment system as much as they can. It's hard to say you're not going to take health insurance because the whole Obamacare thing was like it forced that onto everybody. But going back to the steak and cow thing, like if you put all these pieces between a guy who wants to eat a steak and the cow, if you start putting pieces between those, if you start putting several layers of influence or manipulation between a guy who needs to get fixed by the doctor and the doctor, if it's just those two, they can negotiate terms and it's easy. There's no manipulation. Everybody knows that. It's transparency. That's a free market. You put one extra person in that thing. And my mortgage background is like the mortgage industry is layer upon layer of distance between a guy loaning money. That's weird in and of itself. But the guy loaning money and a guy borrowing money, there's like 5 layers between there. And so if the guy borrowing the money goes bad, well, none of these guys get hurt. This guy at the end definitely doesn't get hurt. The guy that's actually loaning the money, he's on his beach in the Bahamas.
And it wasn't money that he loaned. It was somebody else's money that he loaned.
Thank you. So you're starting to see the magnitude of this problem. We've created a system that glorifies it, a legal code that glorifies it. The legal code is just protecting these guys, these CEOs. And that's why there's all this angst and anger, because people, they don't even know exactly what the problem is. They can just feel it instinctively. Like when you get a bill for $32,000 from the doctor from spending one night, this is my wife, she had a $32,000 bill for spending one night in a hospital. All she did was get antibiotics. The bill was $32,000. Like, I mean, if you smack people in the face that hard, they're going to start waking up. This is why my parallel is the Democrat Party. When they started smacking us in the face with some cross-dressers trying to sell you Bud Light beer, I mean, that you can only take getting smacked in the face so much with that kind of thing. So both of these things, the dam is going to break on its own. We don't need to do much to break this dam. Yeah.
But we'll be here ready.
We'll be here ready, but you better be ready to swim, dude. You better get your flotation device on, because I think it's probably around the corner. Everybody thinks that this Trump thing is going to be a magic fix, and look, I prefer him over any alternative. Yeah. But there is these guys are saying that our economy, they're handing him the greatest economy that there's some hidden gems behind this great economy. I think anybody who's in a regular guy job knows that right now.
What does your notes say?
Well, I was listening to CNBC this morning, and there's a guy on there. He's a Yale senior associate dean. It's a big title, right?
Yes, you're a senior associate.
And he had his badge.
Oh, wow. And
no,
a badge.
it's just these badges make me laugh, man. These titles make me laugh. So he was bragging this morning on CNBC about his CEO summit that they had very recently, and it was just this week, which and the summit was like 50 yards away from where the other guy got gunned down, whacked, as you say.
He's Italian. We whack people.
So he was saying how courageous these and probably true. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're gonna come out and brave getting shot.
Yeah, and brave getting shot. Now, odds were probably pretty long that there was going to be another wacko.
And they probably doubled down on security.
They probably doubled down on security. But this guy went to great lengths to defend these guys as all being patriots. Now, I don't know. This is something that I'll open the door. I'll bet a lot of comments will come in on this, whether or not you guys out there in the public think that these guys are patriots. Most of the U.S., I think there are probably a handful of these guys that are patriotic, but generally speaking, all of these guys 6 months ago were hook, line, and sinker on all the woke business, right, which was the most destructive thing to the whole American culture thing is anything that I can imagine. So how they've suddenly flipped this dime, all they've done is change the wind changed directions, and they're changing with it. Their principal orientation is zero.
The definition of patriot: a person who vigorously supports their country and is prepared to defend it against enemies or detractors. I don't know if any CEOs would fall into that category.
I don't know. Have any CEOs in this country taken up arms to defend this country?
I mean, there might be some guys who fund the Gulf War or something.
If anybody knows, if any of you CEOs are that guy, please come out and tell us. I mean, not that that's the only way, because my buddy who went to West Point always said, I serve my country. And I'm like, there's not only one way to serve your country. You don't have to do military duty, in my mind, to serve your country. I think you can serve in a lot of different ways. But patriotism, I think, is an important quality to have. I think it's truly self-destructive as a population to be the opposite of that. Right. And like, I think most of us know that we've trained these young people to not like our country that much, to be the opposite of patriotic. Where did that come from?
I mean, to me, it just makes me think that there's a higher power that's trying to destroy.
You're trying to talk about they again, aren't you?
I mean, it's got to come up in every episode.
It's going to come up in every episode.
Because there is a they somewhere.
There is a they.
Who are trying, whether it's the Rothschilds or whoever it might be.
Well, in this instance, it can be as simple as the media. The legacy media has been the they for the last. They're part of the people keeping this dam up. They're part of the people that are the dam. I mean, they've been telling us these stories for at least 10 years, but probably more like 50 years, about what this corporate system is good for, and they're in its beginnings, it was probably really good. It was like what you said. We're trying to build things to make these people more productive and have a happier lifestyle. But then at a certain point, there's this thing in economics called the point of diminishing returns. At a certain point, like, we've got as much lavish lifestyle as we can possibly choke down anymore. Like, you can only eat so many donuts before you puke, right? Yeah. We're kind of at that point. I think
we're at our 7th Krispy Kreme, and we're like, you know what?
I mean, I'm going to puke if I eat any more.
No, it's
Seriously.
true. And I would say, is true happiness come from all these things? Because if you really think about true happiness, it's having a family, working for a living, like, being surrounded by loved ones, having good friends. Like, there's all these things that really don't cost much.
Anything.
Yeah. And, but I think that the system has tricked us into believing that more is going to satisfy us,
Yeah.
and
it
it's
never
not true.
does. It never does. We're just like rats running on that wheel faster and faster and faster. And we're not going anywhere on that wheel. But the energy that's created by that wheel is going somewhere.
Yeah.
They are the beneficiaries of all of our rat wheel running. Yeah. And to their credit, I mean, yeah, they really, they got us. But like, is that patriotic? No, I don't think it is either. And I think that's where all this vitriol comes from, right? Because everybody kind of intuitively gets that now. It's not rocket science anymore. They did a pretty good job at like kind of shielding themselves, but they've gone too far.
Yeah. And it's all it's going to be a wild ride, I think, over the next decade. Yeah. So I'm hoping we just keep making these podcasts and we can just talk about, what's going on and seeing how these dams start coming apart. And maybe we're going to have to go to ham radio because there's...
Well, that's funny that you bring that up. I don't know if you're trying to wrap it up or not. There's the People's Rights group that I got involved in 2020.
Oh, yeah. What is it called?
It was called People's Rights. That's it. It wasn't. They didn't.
This group of
they
what
weren't.
are they called?
That's the problem with all these
branding.
freedom fighters. They're the worst marketers known to man. I mean, seriously, they've got some really
what's the
good
other group?
Tactical
Yes,
civics.
We need to get one of those guys on here.
Those
to
guys,
chat through some stuff.
we will, because the guy that's in my group is a really sharp guy, and he's he's a great guy. But where was it? Oh, the ham radio thing. Well, in the absence of internet, like even with an EMP, you can still operate ham radios. And there's a huge, not a huge, there's a
community.
There's a community of people who do operate ham radios, and it's kind of interesting.
Well, I've joked with Adam about it because he lives out there in Kiowa, and so I'm like, dude, if I got a radio, we could just like hit each other up,
Right.
So.
That's interesting stuff, but I think there's a movie that they produced, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago too. I forget the name of this movie, but it's basically as if most people on planet Earth just get wiped out. God, I wish I could remember this movie because it's a really good movie. And
it wasn't Leave the World Behind, right?
No.
I mean, that was more recent.
Was it? Yeah.
Have you seen that one? The
No.
one Obama produced?
No. Obama.
Yeah. And it's like a 3-step program how to like destroy America and disrupt everything.
They do these foreshadowing things all the time.
Part of me is like they have to put it into the ether in order for it to come to fruition.
Well, that's what I think they've already designed the plan for, and they're just like their way of absolving themselves of pure fraud and corruption is to say, well, we told you.
Yeah. Well, it's like COVID. Remember there was like a sitcom or like a
Contagion.
TV show. Yeah, it was like
it's a movie.
Right.
That's
even Outbreak or whatever. There's
Outbreak
been several
was-
movies. Yeah.
Outbreak was kind of in there a little bit, but this Contagion movie with Matt Damon is an exact replica of what happened in COVID. Not exact is a little extreme, but it's a pretty close parallel. But it was done 10 years before COVID happened. So I think we should probably pay it. I got to watch that movie and see what's coming.
Yeah, Leave the World Behind.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
we should watch it.
Check it out.
Because actually, I haven't seen it. But I've listened to a lot of commentary on it. And then one of the guys here at the office is like, "You need to watch this movie." Yeah. I don't know if it's good at all, but I think it would be interesting. To see like, all right. Yeah. What is this? The American Apocalyptic Psychological Thriller. So it came out last year.
And Obama produced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a consultant for it. Like, hey, if they were going to destroy America, what should they do? It's like, oh, you got to do these 3 things.
You think you're getting close to the they if you're talking about Obama? I don't think
no.
No.
But Obama's a puppet.
There's no question. I think he's a total
got
puppet.
a big old hand up his crank, and he's just,
I agree with you totally. I'm just like, you're getting close. He's in touch.
But, he's related to the Bushes.
He is related?
Yes.
Really?
They're cousins.
Okay. My buddy did a deep dive study on this too, so like he could give you all the grandparents are really connected up.
It's
right?
it's strange actually.
Yeah.
How all the presidents are related to like this one king in England.
Oh, we're gonna Thanks for getting us shut down, Mark. I don't know where we're going after this. Even Rumble may not take us after this, man.
Whatever. There's so much edgier stuff on YouTube.
Paranoia will destroy it, right?
That's right.
I got a ton of it. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that there is a very closed circle, and it's probably not too many people, but
Well, like the World Economic Forum or something like that.
yeah.
Or what's the other one? The Trilateral Commission and the.
You're gonna put them all out there. Have you ever heard of the Bank of International Settlements?
The BIS.
The BIS, yeah, it is. That's what it. And so supposedly they're at the, like, if you talk about central banks, they are at the pinnacle, and then all the other central banks are underneath them.
I've
yeah.
never. So where is this BIS located in? Like
It's
Switzerland or
It's
something
probably
like
somewhere in Europe. I don't even know if there's a physical location for it. It's just a legal entity that supposedly they dispose of all the policy making for what these other subservient central banks are doing. I think the Federal Reserve Bank is pretty close to the top of that food chain, though.
Do you remember Fort Knox?
Yeah.
Wasn't that like a gold?
Yeah. A gold. A gold for. I think
bank
it's been
for gold.
I think it's been pilfered. And that's pretty common knowledge too. I mean, this is the gold price. Gold is an interesting thing because I think
I heard gold is out, silver's in. Silver's the new gold.
Really?
Yeah. Talk to the rich dad poor dad guy. He's like, oh yeah, silver's.
Well, they're both. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of interesting territory too. But I think gold would be through the roof, much higher price if it weren't for some manipulation in that market too. I think I didn't realize this until a couple of years ago, but there's an entity in London who kind of sets pricing on gold, and they buy a bunch of shorts against it to basically manipulate the price down.
I didn't realize that diamonds weren't rare. And that you could make them easily, and that you could just, enslave a bunch of Africans to dig up stuff.
Right.
But they have to like withhold them so that they are rare and hold their value.
Yeah.
It's messed up.
These guys know what they're
Blood
doing,
diamonds.
man. Yeah, blood diamonds. Did you see that movie?
Yeah, that's when I learned about this thing.
Right.
It's like, I'm paying all this money for these diamonds. It's like you can make them in a lab.
Who knew?
It's just compressed coal.
Right. Yeah, man. I don't know. There's a lot to this whole currency thing, but the currency system that we're involved in is out of control.
So you just gotta live long enough so you can see it all burn.
I don't know if I want to see that happen, man. I mean, do you?
No, I mean, listen, I know where I'm going when this all burns, so I'm
then
not.
You're saved.
Yeah,
you're saved. Right?
I am saved. All right.
I don't know if the save could be true for me. I'm still debating that, and I'm trying to get myself on the right side of the equation right now. Anyway, what else you want to talk about?
No, I think this was a good episode. I think
good.
This is we talked about some. I think you got a lot out there that will just interest some people and connect with the right person.
Yeah, and we're not condoning whacking CEOs, right?
No, not at all.
For anybody that's out
and
there.
that was really tough for me. I feel like in the sense of I can see both sides of what people are saying, but at the end of the day, it's like, what's the sanctity of life, And I was hearing people comparing this guy to like Don Corleone, like the Godfather. Well, the Godfather's got, kids and grandkids, and he's a husband and whatever, but he's over here like, just completely murdering people. And just a bad person.
Well, murder is obviously like probably the oldest sin on planet. People
Cain
murder each other,
Abel.
right? Yeah,
I mean, it's
not an uncommon thing, and it's not a totally, I think at a certain point you have to do something drastic. I mean, you can't be a diplomat forever. Reasonable people don't sometimes get hurt. It's just so at a certain point
there has to be a revolution, right?
That's why wars get fought.
Yeah.
That's why at a certain point people come to violence out of the necessity to break that dam down. And so it's
But I'm wondering, what is the likelihood? Like, even nowadays, right? There's like assured mutual self-destruction if anyone goes to like nuclear war with each other, right? Like, so there's almost an element of like, okay, there's almost no need for war because almost everyone's powerful enough to completely obliterate the other person. And so now it comes down to like just common sense and diplomacy.
Well, that's probably kind of the problem with where we're at, is because that's why this too big to fail thing is really more or less where we're at, because we're kind of trapped by that problem of, I mean, a lot of Americans have guns, but we don't have any capability to really coagulate, and that's another problem. Like, that's why these one-offs are more prone to happen the way that they do, because that's the only way you can slip through the system. There's no way.
Yeah, if there was a coalition or somebody,
there's
getting
no
together,
coalition.
we have this military that's building up. They would know instantly that
they would come shut us
firearms
down.
And tobacco would be in there in a second and burn you down.
They've proven that time and time. Ruby Hill, what's the David Koresh? Every time that there's any kind of, and those guys weren't even violent.
Yeah,
but they shut them down before anything. Yeah, so you're right. Like that's why I'm glad you brought that up, because that is another reason why these one-offs. And I think that the problem is that we have a lot of psychologically imbalanced people. I don't think anybody realizes how this guy just destroyed his life. I mean, he probably will get out.
He might get the death penalty.
Yeah,
and then, but that's why I'm just confused about this whole thing. Like, sounds like he grew up in a good family. He went to college. He looked like a good-looking dude, happy, and all this. Like, and then did you even see him? Like, it's like he didn't even know how to use a gun, and it like got jammed.
He got him.
Yeah, but it's like, who is this guy? Dude, he's a CIA shill, dude. It's like the guy who killed or tried to assassinate Trump.
It could be that. It could be that. I hope it's not that.
It's the lizard people at the top trying to play chess,
God.
and they're like,
every single time you bring it back
get
to
these
lizard
people to take action?
You might be right.
It's like a big
man.
chess game. It's like, okay, well, maybe if we get this guy to do this, then that dominoes will fall here.
Weren't we trying to wrap this up before you got to lizard people?
We're going to do a whole episode on the lizard people.
Well, let me know when that's coming. I want to be prepared, because my head is in the sand on this
David
topic
Icke,
right
just like Google him, all right?
Lizard people and flat earth. We'll be back next time.
That's right. All right.
All right.
Well,
thank you for talking.
Yeah, of course, as always.
All right, dude.
Love being on the show and letting you vent, so that the
venting
world
is what I do.
So the world can just enjoy your venting.
Enjoyment is a generous term, I think, in this case, right? Anyway, thank you guys. Thank you, sir. Let's get out of here. It's only Thursday.